Right on.
All right. Good evening. It's approximately 6 p.m. on Tuesday, June 15th, 2021. I'd like to call tonight's Select Board meeting to order. Before we begin our agenda, there is a little blurb that has to be read. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12th, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law, this meeting of the Sutton Select Board is in hybrid format with both an in-person and Zoom component. To join the meeting, visit zoom.us/join and enter meeting ID number 852-7388-0982 and passcode 069715. The meeting will be broadcast and recorded on local public access stations, Verizon channel number 31 and Charter/Spectrum channel 191, and live streamed on the town's YouTube channel when available. All right, now that we've been called to order, why don't we begin with the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. All right, next up we have public forum. Public forum is limited to 5 minutes per topic. Discussion or comments about town employees or agency members shall be avoided so as not to violate an individual's rights. Is there anyone here this evening for public forum? If you would, Mike, obviously just introduce yourself.
Michael Whittier, 70 Torrey Road, and tonight I'm representing the Sutton Teachers Association. I just wanted to come tonight and to clarify some comments that were made last week with regard to some cyber training or whatever it was. There seems to be some misunderstanding or misstatement here. There were no negotiations over that matter. There was a 5-minute hallway conversation. You should be very happy that people do watch your meetings because I got 4 phone calls about this. So there was no negotiation. There was a 5-minute conversation where it was briefly discussed. There were no details. There was no decision made. My recollection of it is, and it was quite a while ago, is that we decided to do it as part of negotiations, and then the world blew up. And so it never got dealt with in negotiations, along with other things. So at no time was there a negotiation. The union didn't say no. The union didn't say yes. We don't really have any details. All I knew was that the town was working with the liability provider, and there was some sort of remuneration or kickback that was going to come back to the town to have people comply with this. But we were never given any details, what the time commitment was, whatever. There was no discussions of it. So I just wanted to clarify it here publicly because it was expressed last week and there was some disappointment expressed, and really we had nothing, it wasn't even on our radar. So I just wanted to clear that up with you folks tonight.
I appreciate that.
Okay.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here for public forum? All right, seeing none, why don't we start off our regularly scheduled meeting dealing with last meeting's select board minutes for the meeting dealing with June 1st, 2021.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to accept the select board minutes of June 1st, 2021 as presented.
Second.
All right, here in a motion, here in a second. Is there any other comments, concerns, questions? All right, do we still have to do a roll call vote for this?
That's what that says.
I guess we do, yeah, literally in big bold letters.
I would assume because we're still doing hybrid.
Hybrid, yeah, we have to be in compliance. All right, well, I had to ask. My fault for not reading all the papers in front of me. All right, then why don't we begin with the roll call vote?
David Hall, aye.
Wendy Mead, aye.
Jonathan Anderson, aye.
Jeff Bannon, aye.
And Jesse Lemanik, aye. Passes unanimously. All right, next up, we had a poll hearing, but it looks like it was canceled as per NGRID. I'm assuming they'll be rescheduled for a future meeting. All right, then why don't we move on to the appointment of an associate member to the Conservation Commission, Mr. Timothy Thompson. Jim, if you would.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tim? So we have Timothy Thompson here tonight. He is requesting to be a member of the Sutton Conservation Commission as an alternate member. The Conservation Commission met and approved his joining. And Conservation Commission is recommending a 1-year term. We've requested a 3-year term just because he's new and this is an opportunity for him to learn. He has a background in chemistry, et cetera, from UMass Dartmouth, so he's more than qualified for the position.
All right, thank you. Tim, if you would, just want to introduce yourself to the board and to the town.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Smith. I've lived here for a little over 11 years. I grew up in a small town, couldn't wait to leave. Spent a few years in Worcester and moved right back to a small town. So small town government's always interested me. You know, it only works if the people participate. And I've wanted to volunteer in some way for a while, but my kids were young and the time wasn't right. And now that they're growing up a little bit, the time is right. I'm eager to get started. And I've had a couple of positive experiences with conservation. The first one really incentivized me to learn a lot more about it. And I've been following them for a while. And I still have a lot to learn, but I'm excited to get started.
All right, thank you. Would you mind if I open it up to my colleagues
Sure.
for questions?
Yeah.
All right, Dave.
Thank you. And so first of all, your application picks up on some of my favorite points. This is one of my favorite applications that I've read in a long time. And you just touched on it. You know, you lived here for 11 years. You had a positive experience with the board, and that sort of made you interested in coming out and volunteering. So we always say here that, and you just said it, the town doesn't run if we don't have volunteers filling all of these positions. So we're just really grateful to have somebody that is enthusiastic. It sounds like you're coming at it from just the right direction, and the alternate position is such a great way to learn. And so I'm just happy to have you and wish you good luck. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you. Wendy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm sure you'll hear this from all of my colleagues as well, but thank you for volunteering your time. It's really critical in a town of this size to find a pool of people that are willing to step up. And I think as an alternate, it's a fantastic learning opportunity. Jim, who is he replacing?
Andy DeWolf left the board, resigned. Then we moved up Robin Jakes from associate to, or alternate to full member, and then created the alternates position.
Oh, fantastic. Well, you're joining a very diverse and talented board, so welcome to you and thank you again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Jonathan?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for, for volunteering your time. As you said, I think this is so critical in that, the town doesn't run without volunteers and people getting involved and bringing their expertise to it as well. And also, too, especially with the Conservation Commission, there's a steep learning curve, and the associate position was created so that people could get on there and not just be thrown into the fire right away, but you can actually start to learn and discover. And there's a lot to learn, and I think all the boards have a lot to learn, but especially the Conservation Commission, there's just so much complexity to that. So, and the fact that you're interested in it as well, and learning that, how much there is, if and when you ever become a full member, you'll just have a lot of knowledge. And I encourage you to take, I think there's training and whatnot. I think I encourage you to take that, because I think, conservation is a very important board to this town and the protection of our wetlands. So just thank you for your time and your willingness to serve. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Jeff?
Hey, Mr. Chairman. I'll look around my divider here. Welcome to service in the town. All of us here on the board have kind of a diverse background in a lot of different boards and committees in town. So it's very interesting, the things you learn. And I think, like Jonathan said, Conservation Commission, there's a lot to learn. I know there's a lot to learn, planning board, finance, school committee and so forth, but Conservation Committee is, it's good that you have a background in chemistry, I guess. So welcome. Thank you again for volunteering.
Thank you. I'm not really going to echo the sentiments of my colleagues, but I do want to stress one point. Again, town government essentially is filled with volunteers. So the fact that you were willing to just kind of step up and, you know, give some time back to the town, I just think it's fantastic. And I also like the fact that you're coming from a scientific background. You know, in conversations that I had with past members, you know, Concom, unlike, say, the Select Board or even the school committee, which focuses on town activities, you know, Concom really is an agency of the state, and you know, it requires compliance with state regulations. So I think, you know, the fact that you have a scientific background will make that learning element of it that much easier. So I think it's fantastic. I enjoy you. Well, I hope you have tremendous success, that you enjoy your time there, and you're able to give back to the town, which, you know, you moved into 11 years ago. So I think that's great. Do we have an issue, though, in terms of appointment? Because you mentioned the fact that, Jim, that this could potentially be a 3-year appointment. Should we go that route?
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, it's the select board's decision. Conservation just advises and recommends, but this is a select board appointment, so it's your decision.
All right. Well, does anybody have any thoughts on that, or are we comfortable with the motion as it's drafted?
Fine, Mr. Chair.
I'm fine with it. I think it makes sense.
I think
All
that
right,
makes sense.
then why don't we go forward with the
Especially in
motion?
this board where there's such a steep learning curve.
Yeah, absolutely.
I do have a motion, Mr. Chair. Motion to approve Timothy Thompson as an associate member to the Conservation Commission with an expiration date of June 30, 2024.
Second.
All right, thank you. We're hearing a motion, a second. Are there any other comments, questions, concerns? All right, then we're doing the roll call vote, so.
David Hall, aye.
Wendy Mead, aye.
Jonathan Anderson, aye.
Jeff Bannon, aye.
And Jesse Lemanik, aye. Tim, welcome aboard, best of luck, and hopefully we'll see you around Town Hall sooner than later.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You take
Thank you.
care.
All right, the next item on our agenda is rescinding the declaration of emergency COVID-19 for the town of Sutton. Jim?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, we declared a state of emergency on March 19th, 2020. It seems like a long time ago. But it was just a little over a year and a few months. And, you know, I did ask Cheryl to give me some, you know, numbers on what we've been through. She says that there were approximately 1,200 cases in the town of Sutton. Number of positive cases were 825. That doesn't include suspect, probable, other cases of 300 plus or minus. So she carried a number of approximately 1,200 total cases. There were 16 deaths, unfortunately. That was deaths where COVID was the primary cause of death, not a secondary cause, et cetera. The number of residents tested were over 19,000. Now that involves people that needed to be tested on a regular basis for their jobs, and that kind of elevates that number. So there were a number of repeat testers. And we are doing well relative to the southern Worcester region where we had the clinic down in Uxbridge. We had the second vaccination down at the schools today. 82 were vaccinated the first time, 90 were vaccinated this time. So that means that there were an additional 8 people that received either their first dose or received their first dose in another location and got a second dose here. So that's good news for the schools, and ultimately will contribute to you know, the town and the state getting beyond COVID-19. Obviously, the governor rescinded his declaration of emergency, and I think it's time that the board take this up tonight to rescind our declaration of emergency.
All right, thank you. Thank you for the update. Why don't we open up for comments or questions? Dave?
Thank you. You know, I don't really have an awful lot of comments other than to echo Jim's first comment, which is I can't believe it's been 15 months since this first went into effect. It's been a long 15 months. You know, I think our original purpose for declaring our local declaration of emergency was really just in support of what the governor was doing. And the governor's reversing his, and I think it's time for us to do the same thing. So happy to do it. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Wendy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm in complete agreement. You know, now's the time, and I chuckled a little when you said 19,000 people were tested, because being high risk, I went every week.
Yeah.
So I was a frequent flyer in that number. You know, obviously horrible to hear about any deaths regarding any situation, but you know, for those people who are comfortable getting the vaccination, I'm so glad we're getting closer to, you know, that percentage that we're looking for. You know, my mom will finally be able to come home from California. It's been almost 19 months. So I am more than happy to agree to a vote to rescind our state of emergency. That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Wendy. Jonathan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, like my colleagues, you know, with the state declaration of emergency being rescinded, I think this is the right time for us to do this as well. And so, yeah, I'm in full support of it as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jeff?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Not really an awful lot to add, just when you look at the case numbers, though, when you know, that's better than 10% of the town you know, had the virus, so that's, I didn't think it was quite that high, but that's a big number, and I didn't realize that we had 16 deaths in town either, so.
We were actually a red community for 24
Right,
or 28
yeah.
weeks. So, you know, there was a period, it seemed forever,
Yeah,
that we were red. And I got calls from the state, and Cheryl got calls.
I know there were certain weeks where the numbers just really spiked.
Yeah,
So-
and we'll have to look at that, you know, and figure out why that is, but, you know, we're moving forward at this point.
Yeah,
so.
great, so, I think it's the right time, and that's all I have.
All right, thank you. Well, I'm pretty excited about this. That's for sure. To your point, Dave, you know, we agreed to this back when it was 2 weeks to flatten the curve, and again, 15 months later, yeah. I could soapbox. I could, you know, just go off on a political tangent, but I won't. But I'm hoping that history is recognized in the years to come, because. What the heck? To me, and it's no fault to ours, because we as a Board of Selectmen, ultimately, we are part of the executive branch of town. Our job is to enforce the laws that come down from the state. But at the state level, I really hope that future gatherings of the general court really seek to rein in the powers of the government, particularly the governor, because as a historian, I look back at points in history when the rights of the residents of the Commonwealth have been essentially just kind of chucked aside for whatever reason. And to me, I come up with two. There was one point, and again, this is where I'm going to really sound like a nerd, back when the charter of Massachusetts Bay was jettisoned, along with the charter of Plymouth and Rhode Island and so forth, when King James II was on the throne, and he decided to just kind of ram all the colonies together to make it his own personal domain. It was called the Dominion of New England. And in that time, the right of local government, the right of property ownership was essentially shredded. And people who had residence had to travel to Boston, even if you lived in Sutton, by foot or by horse, to go to Boston to prove that you had the legitimate right to your property. So again, coming from the English perspective of notions of rights and so forth, you know, that was a big one. The second was something I talked about in one of my classes today, and that was the Massachusetts Government Act, one of the intolerable acts, when again, just the Constitution or the Charter was just shredded and the rights of the people who trampled on. I understand the fact that we were in a pandemic, but when you think of what was done in the name of trying to fight a disease, you had the right of association that was trampled. You had the right of religious expression that was trampled. You had the right to earn a living that was trampled. And again, I don't know if the ends justify the means. I'm not an expert. I'm not going to claim to be one. But I hope that as we move beyond this, future generations just have an opportunity to look back and think, do we need to go down that route? Because I have a feeling that when all of the science and all of the facts and the evidence are hashed out and the politics are set aside, and again, I don't see that happening anytime soon, but when we get to that point, I think they're going to think that we just kind of overreacted a little bit. And I hope that future generations are able to deal with these situations a little more respective of the Constitution. Because for those of you who've never had an opportunity to read the Constitution of the Commonwealth, it is quite protective in our rights as residents. And again, I think we've gone beyond, but it is what it is. I think we as a board did our duty. I think town government did a fantastic job. And of course, we have to recognize EMS. The fire department showed up every single day. The police department showed up every day. The highway department was here. The people were working in town hall. Granted, some of the procedures had to change, but people were here providing the services. So we in Sutton, we did the best we could. And I think that should be remembered by the residents. So for what it's worth, it is what it is, and I'm glad we can move on. Summertime's here. I'm glad everything's opening up. I like hearing the kids running around, no more masks in public. It's a good thing, so hopefully we've moved beyond. All right, I will step down from my soapbox. I apologize. But we do have a motion before us.
Not yet.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to rescind the declaration of emergency put in place March 19th, 2020 by the Sutton Select Board in response to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Second.
All right, hearing a motion, hearing a seconded. Any last thoughts, any questions, concerns? All right, roll call vote. David?
David Hall, aye.
Wendy Mead, aye.
Jonathan Anderson, aye.
Jeff Bannon, aye.
Jesse Lemanik, aye. Passes unanimously. All right, next up, we have approval for 3-year police union and Teamsters contracts. Jim?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I should probably speak into my mic. Sorry about that. You have 2 3-year contracts before you. They were negotiated over the spring period of time. They were very cordial and professional negotiations with both unions. I highly respect everybody involved. And in the end, we came to an agreement of 2% in year 1, 2.5% in year 2, and 2.5% in year 3. The one issue was police and the Teamsters, the dispatchers and the Teamsters union showed comparable salaries of surrounding areas and surrounding to Sutton, and showed that they were underpaid relative to other communities. So we took that seriously. We spent some time, and in the end, we ended up, knocking off a step or 2, and then putting a step or 2 on the other end of their pay scale. We also added some educational language, the stipends for degrees. We didn't authorize Quinn. That was a discussion that we had, but we gave a bump in the stipends for associates, bachelor's, and master's degrees because we do want an educated police department, and they are committed to that. In exchange for all this language, we did receive the ability to assess a $5 per paycheck charge fee for any new employee after July 1. That is a very small amount to start, but when we have a fully new workforce for the town, that could bring in roughly $40,000 a year, assuming the teachers union signs on, and right now we're working with them for some potential language. So we also got Corey policy language in their contract. We were able to buy out the language in the Teamsters contract that authorized sick leave buyback for 85% of what was owed. And that language is no longer in the contract, so that unfunded liability disappears, at least from the Teamsters contract. So little by little, we start breaking away with some of these legacy costs that affect these contracts. So I'll answer any questions that the board may have, but you have the contracts before you for signature.
All right, thank you, Jim.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman.
Why don't we open it up for questions? So, Dave?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jim, thank you. And, so the public knows, we had an opportunity to speak about this already in executive session, so we're not seeing this for the first time. So we've been through these changes. I don't really have a lot of questions about the changes. I'm sure my colleagues will say this as well, but we certainly appreciate the cooperation that we get. This is with the unions. I think this is definitely a spirit of this is one town, and trying, I think both sides trying to do the best for the town as a whole. And you get that because you're cooperative and trustworthy over many years of doing this. And I think that the police pay issue is an example of that, where they can bring you evidence that you can see and absorb and recognize to be correct, and you're willing to do something about that. And I think it's the right thing to do. It's the right thing to do for the town. It's the right thing to do for our officers. It'll be good for our force in the long run. But it creates the right atmosphere for having these negotiations, not just this time, but as we move forward. So kudos to everybody involved. I think, you mentioned the OPEB thing, which does sound like a small thing, but for people to be willing to give up $5 out of their pay is, we did, just OPEB geeks, if you will, recognize where that will go, and we appreciate that. But probably most people on the street don't really get the OPEB thing, but for people to be willing to give up $5 a pay period is pretty significant. So again, I think you get that because you've negotiated in good faith over a long period of time. So well done. Kudos, and thanks again to the unions. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Wendy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Again, Jim, thank you for the time that you've taken. And I know Tim has been involved and many other people, so, it doesn't go unnoticed. I just think the adjustment of the contracts is so critical to employee retention. Yeah. If you think about the money that is wasted having to train somebody for a job that you just trained somebody else for is an enormous loss of time and funding. So I'm glad that we were able, by we I mean everybody but me, that we were able to change the contracts to reflect that, and the OPEB money. I wouldn't say it was enjoyable, but I did read through both contracts. Oh. And Dave and I were talking earlier. One may have had a better summarization of the changes than the other, but that's just a thought for going forward. And I just wanted to talk about Quinn. We as a small community can't afford Quinn. I don't know, I think there's a lot of large communities that can't either. Mm-hmm. So I'm really glad to see that we're giving some recognition of education, whether it's a degree that's achieved or credits toward that. So I think that was a really healthy balance of, what we needed to see. So that's all I have, Mr. Chair. And just again, thank you, Jim, and to the people on behalf of the two negotiating entities.
Thank you, Wendy. Jonathan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I think echoing the sentiments of my colleagues, I think what strikes me about this process is just the smoothness that it went. And I know it's not always easy being in negotiation, but I think when you see in workplaces or communities where there is contention, it really doesn't serve the employees, it doesn't serve the town, it doesn't serve the townspeople. And I think creating an atmosphere where we can negotiate and there's a win-win on both sides is really important to me, and I think it's really critical in kind of just having not been part of the exact process, but we obviously got an insight in our executive session. It just really strikes me how important that is, because it allows for, like I said, a win-win on both sides, and I think that's really important, and we all win because of that, and I think that's really important. And obviously there's certain things we may want to get that we don't always get, but I think when it's a spirit of kind of collaboration and willingness to work through these issues, we come out with a better result as a whole. So I'm just thrilled that this is the process that we have here in Sutton at this point in time. And I think it's all parties, but I think, Jim, you're obviously very much a part of that, and Tim as well, but it's all parties. And I think the unions and the union leaders and the employees. So I'm thrilled. So thank you.
Thank you,
Mr. Chairman.
Jeff.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Everyone's pretty much summed up really my thoughts on everything. But, I think the theme that's running through all of it is just, credibility from you and the town administration. But also on the other side too is, everyone came to the table in good faith. So I think that shows in the final document. So it's great work. I will say I don't have any problems with the two summaries and how they were presented. But it is good work, and I'm glad it got done.
Thank you.
Thank you. I really don't have anything to add. Obviously, my time on the board, this is the second or third time contracts have been renewed, and I don't recall there really being any major issues. And at any point, and again, that has to do with your leadership in particular, Jim. You respect the employees that work for this town, and you want to do as good by them as you can. At the same time, you understand that, we're just one municipality out of 351. So you could easily, and I'm sure this happens in some towns, there's the revolving door. Someone comes in, gets the benefit of training, and they're out looking for, greener pastures. But you show them respect. And to Wendy's point, that training costs money. And if we're going to make that type of investment, even if it's something as learning the roads in town or learning how to operate, a plow truck, more efficiently, there's money involved in that. And by doing all that you can, acting in good faith, retaining the employees, then, the pay increases, the give and take, that's second. Because at the end of the day, you end up with happy staffs. And if you have people that like coming to work, they're going to be committed to the residents in town. And at the end of the day, they're going to do a better job. And Tim, I'm not going to give you any credit.
Well, I will. Mr. Chairman, and not only Tim, but Erin Chinapi, who's
Yes.
the HR director, really ran the numbers, and that had it down to an 8-cent differential over a week period of time, and the union was I'm like, seriously, let's just split the difference. And but that kind of professionalism, it's really great to have as support in negotiating.
Job well done. Thank you. All right, I would entertain motion regarding both contracts simultaneously.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion to approve the 3-year, June 30th, 2021 to June 30th, 2024 Police Union and Teamsters contracts.
Second.
All right, here in a motion, here in a second. Any other comments, questions, concerns? All right, roll call vote.
David Hall, aye.
Wendy Mead, aye.
Jonathan Anderson, aye.
Jeff Bannon, aye.
Jesse Lemanik, aye. Job well done, that's for sure. All right, next up, did you have a chance to get your drink?
Yes, I'm all set.
We have board and committee reappointments. Jim?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As is typical, there are annual reappointments to various boards, and the clerk generally reads the appointments. Over to you, Mr. Clerk.
All right. Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Mr. Chair. So town officials reappointed by the town manager. Animal control, a 1-year reappointment. Daniel Chauvin, expires in 2022. Animal inspector, a 1-year reappointment. Michelle Lafleur, 2022. Board of Assessors, Ray Nichols, 2024, for a 3-year reappointment. Burial agent, 1-year reappointments for Laura Caruso and Cheryl Lewinsky, 2022. Constables, 2 1-year reappointments, Dennis Toll and Laura Caruso, 2022, the term expires. Emergency management, 3 1-year reappointments, Paul Maynard, Donald Conlon, and Jeff Briggs. Term expires in 2022. Emergency planning, 6 1-year reappointments, Cheryl Lewinsky, Matt Belcito, Dennis Toll, John Kuchar, Matt Stencil, and James Smith. Term expires in 2022. Hazardous Waste Coordinator, Fire Chief Matt Belcito, 1-year reappointment, 2022. Parking Clerk, 1-year reappointment, Laura Caruso, term expires in 2022. Town officials seeking reappointment by the Select Board. Board of Appeals, 2 3-year reappointments. Christopher Matera and Richard Haskins, term expires in 2024. Board of Health, 2 3-year reappointments. Tammy Moreau and Diane Miller, term expires in 2024. Cemetery Commission, 1 3-year reappointment. James Renault, term expires in 2024. Conservation Commission, 1 3-year reappointment. William Wentz, term expires in 2024. Council on Aging, 3 3-year reappointments. Wally Baker, Genevieve Dehaan, Paul Maynard, term expires in 2024. Historical Commission, 2 3-year reappointments. Keith Downer and Donna Rossio, term expires in 2024. Housing Authority, 1 5-year reappointment. Barbara Wade, term expires in 2026. Registrar of Voters, 1 3-year reappointment. Deborah Jakes, term expires in 2024. Sewer Commission, 1 3-year reappointment. Carla Capoli, term expires in 2024.
All right, thank you. There is one little note under there that I'd just like to, if I could, just take up. I'd like to thank Dot Gravison, who has decided to step down from the Council on Aging. If anyone has ever had a chance to meet Dot, she is the biggest sweetheart that you could come in contact with, although she's not afraid to tell you when you step out of line. So I'm sure she'll be missed as a presence on that board. All right. I would entertain a motion to make those appointments official.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move to approve as read reappointments made by the Select Board and the Town Manager.
Second.
All right, hearing a motion, hearing a seconded. Any other comments, concerns, questions? All right, roll call vote.
David Hall, aye.
Wendy Mead, aye.
Jonathan Anderson, aye.
Jeff Bannon, aye.
Jesse Lemanik, aye. Passes unanimously. All right, next up we have Town Manager's Update. Jim?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is fairly lengthy. So let me start. Charge point charges. At the school department, we received a grant from DEP through the EVIP program. Don't ask me what that stands for. I couldn't tell you. I could get that for you if you're interested. But and that amount is, what's that?
Electric Vehicle Incentive Program?
That's probably it. National Grid will also provide $24,000 for a total of $30,000 to complete this project. Initially, we were working with a consultant, Rise Engineering. They helped put together the Green Communities application. They quoted us a price of $52,000 to complete the work. Obviously, that didn't make a whole lot of sense. We were contemplating going to town meeting for the remaining $20-some-odd thousand. In the end, I spoke with Larry Morris and Matt Stencil, and they took on the challenge of putting it together. The cost for the equipment and a 5-year warranty, where anything happens, we don't have to deal with it, was $22,000. So they have $8,000 to complete the project, and I feel confident in their ability to complete the work. Larry Morris is leading the electrical. He had a meeting with National Grid. Apparently they have to install a transformer on that pole because there's not enough wattage or ohms or whatever electrical term he was using. But he's working on that, and that will, National Grid will respond hopefully soon. So as soon as the charges are delivered, they should be here within the next week or two. And as soon as we get that transformer installed, we will install these chargers. The town will pay for the electric bill. And the real question comes down to whether we want to charge residents or employees to charge their electric cars at these locations. The state doesn't require that the chargers be free. They encourage them to be free, to encourage people to buy electric cars and to stimulate that industry. But it's not a requirement of the grant process. I'm recommending probably a 3 to 4 month period of time where we can monitor the use and evaluate, are people actually using these chargers? You know, what is, and there's a I don't know what they call it, it's a dashboard essentially that shows what vehicle was where for what period of time. It really detailed, and I can monitor that and give a report back to the board in the fall and you know, make a decision on what you folks think is appropriate. State earmarks. Ryan Fatman was successful in getting a number of earmarks into the state budget. An additional $300,000 is coming to the town of Sutton. $175,000 will go to Waters Farm Barn project, which is underway, and if you've been up there, you've seen the work. This should come close to completing that project. $50,000 will go to Waters Farm for the chimney project. That project has been in abeyance for some period of time, and a lot of it comes down to the uniqueness of that project. We had one individual design or essentially write up the specifications for that project. Richard Irons, I think was his name, and it's such a unique skill. It's not, you don't just hire any mason off the street to do this work. It's a chimney that is incredibly delicate. A lot of the bricks and the mortar turn to dust if you dig further back into it and you just put your hand through it. So, so this allows us some flexibility with the bidding process being a state earmark. So hopefully that'll help us expedite this work and get that done. And in addition, we got $75,000 to go to Marion's Camp for restroom facilities outside of Goddard Lodge. Our plan is to put a prefabricated restroom facility that essentially isn't it's 500 gallons of water and 500 storage tank for the septage, sewage, and that's pumped out by Chase Harris or some other septic company. And the device is, the system is really attractive, and I can show you pictures in the future. But 75 probably won't pay for the whole thing, so we may need an appropriation at fall town meeting out of the for capital to fund the other 75 for the system. So I thought it was great news. That would allow us to open Goddard Lodge because we've got handicap accessible restroom facilities associated with it. And then the lodge can be opened for regular use by the public. MBR bid opening, membrane batch reactor. We've talked about this. That's down at the wastewater treatment plant at the school department. We went out. We got it designed. We had the specs. We went out to bid. We received one bid from Utility Service Company out of Perry, Georgia. For $427,000 and change. Obviously, we had anticipated roughly a $200,000 cost. So our engineers are looking into, are they have experience in everything else. Now, I believe they do. I think they're partnering with Suez Company, the company that was involved with the xenon processing down at the MBR tank. So I think we've got a good company. The question is, do we have the money? And we applied today for the federal grant, the first tranche or first payment. I don't know why they use the word tranche, but the first payment from the federal grant, the ARPA monies, American Rescue Plan Act. So we've applied for that. Now, it's very strict in what you can use these funds for, but they're giving you the money up front, and then requiring you to do a single federal audit at the end to justify that you spent it in the correct way. So you got to be real careful with this money. So Tim's in charge of this, and we'll have to see how it works out. But I do feel that this would qualify under that grant because they do authorize water and sewer projects. This is sort of a sewer project down there, as well as the septic tank out behind Town Hall. That is another sewer type project. So I do think we will be able to add $200,000 from that federal grant, along with the $200,000 remaining from the middle school, high school project to complete that project. So, fingers crossed. But I'm fairly confident that we'll be able to move forward with that. The annual goals meeting will be held on July 20th at 6 p.m. at Blackstone National Golf Course. We will order off the menu and proceed with our goals. The Sutton Public Library is open to the public. I think I gave you this update last meeting. We will go fine-free as of July 1. A number of the surrounding towns are going fine-free, and the library trustees felt that it was time for Sutton to go fine-free. And they didn't feel like there was any abuse of the system throughout the pandemic. So they want to trust the people and move forward with fines, with no fines. An additional add is the Juneteenth holiday. Town Hall will be closed Monday, June 21st, in observance of the Juneteenth holiday. Last year, the state of Massachusetts adopted this holiday in observation, in observance of the end of slavery in 1865. This holiday was agreed to in the recent contracts that you just voted for, and I think it sends a good message to the community. So transfer stations are on sale as of yesterday, so hurry down to see Donna and purchase your transfer station sticker. And that's essentially it for updates, Mr. Chairman.
Excellent. Thank you, Jim. Appreciate it. Why don't we open up for questions? Dave?
Thank you. Great update, Jim. I'm going to pick and choose things to talk about in the interest of brevity.
Sure.
So first of all, as you said, thank you to Ryan for the work, and Joe, if he was involved, for those grants, the state money, and those particular projects those are really great projects to be able to spend some money on. So that barn at Waters Farm has been an ongoing project, particularly, as you mentioned, the chimney project, which to me is, long-term good for the structural health of the building itself. I think without getting that done, could be a long-term problem. And, that's such a historic home and great place to visit if you have a chance to do so.
That's very true, because those chimneys are, the structural integrity of that building are all based around those chimney systems, so.
Yeah,
Point well taken.
and so it's a project that was in need of getting done, but without this money, probably was going to be difficult to fund some other way, so
Yeah.
it's really great to have that. And obviously, to me at least, every opportunity we have to continue to develop and improve down at Waters Farm is again, money well spent. I think that's a great resource for the town, and for us to be able to continue to expand down there is great. So, Tim, if I may, a quick question on a single federal audit. Would it be limited to just this one grant, or once you do one, do you have to really sort of, is it exposed to all the grants that we get?
So that's why there's the name single audit. So it's one audit of the town of all their federal grants. So it pulls, so right now the requirement, it's changed over the years, but the current requirement is if you have under $750,000 in federal expenditures, not receipts, but it's expenditure driven, then you have to have a single audit. So by the time you pull in the CARES money and this other new money, and then all the school special education grants, and anything that,
So we were already
police
there.
vests, and we've been under that limit for a number of years now. It used to be 300,000, and we were getting an annual single audit as part of our annual audit, and then we fell below the current threshold of 750, but this will kick us over that again, and
Okay, so we're there anyway.
we're gonna, yeah.
Okay, thank you. And I'm good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Dave. Appreciate that. Wendy?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jim, you answered a lot of my questions that sometimes I have a hard time reading them myself after I've written them down. Question on the funds that Senator Fatman and Representative McKenna were able to garner for the town. What is the timeline on the restroom facilities? Approximately.
Yeah, you know, Ryan actually called and mentioned that he could only get $75,000, and that's terrific. It won't quite pay for the system that we're looking for. We will probably need an additional appropriation at fall town meeting. So the likely time frame is probably now moved, maybe late fall or next spring is likely for that. And we have access for these funds for 12-month period of time during the state fiscal year. So
Okay, fantastic.
yeah.
The MBR, it's a little disappointing to see the bid because that was such a significant component of, you know, keeping that treatment versus running the septic. So I'm interested to see, you know, what the engineers think about, you know, this particular company. Do we go back out to bid? You know, I think those are some pretty significant questions. You know, we get the federal grant, then it becomes almost a non-issue. Question, if we were to still be planning on running the septic, would that federal grant still be available to us, or is that driven solely by the fact that we're working on the treatment plant?
Would the federal money cover a sewer project going down to the schools?
Would it be contributed toward?
It could.
project?
It could. And that was part of our discussion at the department head meeting, just internally, whether we wanted to, you know, wait, you know, till fall town meeting or whenever. I still think the cost-benefit analysis supports restoration of the MBR tank. There's no cost, and the septic system out back, there's no cost to that. That'll be federal reimbursement. You know, the $2 million, if we got not the $1 million that's allocated to the town, but we also get the county money that's disseminated throughout Worcester cities and towns, because there's no county government in Worcester, as you know. That could potentially pay for, let's say, $2 million of the sewer project, but that still leaves $2.5 million remaining that we would have to find another funding source for. So you know, again, 20 years from now, we'll be in a similar situation. Hopefully we do a right job with the MBR tank, and you know, maybe they can continue to restore it and upgrade it, but that remains to be seen.
Okay, thank you so much. And just one comment on the Juneteenth holiday. It really strikes a chord to me that it took 156 years, you know, for this to be recognized. And I just think it's time, and I'm really glad that the Commonwealth, you know, saw fit to make this a holiday. And I just want to give you both kudos on your acronyms. They're coming right along.
Thank you.
That's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Jonathan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Jim, for your update.
Sure.
I just have a couple questions around the chargers at the school. I think one of the questions I have is around just, do we know how many people have electric cars in the school? Like, do we have any idea at this point? Or what's driving, I guess, the installation there?
A couple of factors. One is, you know, the theory of if you build it, they will come. So the idea of creating the infrastructure incentivizes people to buy electric cars because they know they can charge them. Mm-hmm. You know, we've got a number of free charges here in Millbury and surrounding towns. That Grafton is actually looking to put up a charger. Millbury obviously has a number of them. And the thought is that incentivizes people to buy electric cars. And all of them are free at this point. Mm-hmm. I did ask the Board of Assessors how many electric cars do we have registered in the town of Sutton, and they came back with 25 electric cars. So it's still a relatively new industry in the town, but you know, most of them are Teslas, to be honest with you. You know, and that's great. But you know, hopefully there's more and more interest in providing electric cars.
Do you know if the programs that you know have installed them, like even the ones we have here? Well, I know you don't know this directly for Sutton, but have you heard that through this process that people are actually being more incentivized to buy electric cars because there's more availability of chargers?
I haven't heard that. You know, the state has been, you know, creating these programs to encourage it, but you know, I don't have any specific data that backs that up one way.
Yeah, I know we don't probably have that for Sutton. I mean,
Yeah.
I guess one question we have around the charges we do have in Sutton, like what are usually our expenses around that?
The two Clipper Creek charges we have here at Town Hall are free, and there is one that was just put up by the police station. Allows me to park up here, but in the wintertime because it gets slippery down there. But anyway, that's another story. The cost for the electricity to run those charges over an annual basis is a little over $2,000. You know, for a while I was checking the electric for that particular meter for quite a period of time, and then we averaged it out to about $2,000. And we figured that was the cost of gasoline that we were getting for, you know, the fire department car and my car. So for those two cars, we were essentially paying for the gasoline that we would have taken out of the pump down at the highway facility. So that was the thought process behind that, and that, you know, anybody else that charged there was fine because the electric bill was manageable, and knowing that we kind of offset the electric costs with gas costs. And we got two, you know, $37,000 cars for free from the state.
Yeah, so it doesn't sound like, are there many residents that use the existing?
You know, I haven't seen many lately, but they are available. Typically on the weekends. The fire department has charges their car and leaves their plug-in, but the charges are available to the public.
Are there any like rules that people need to follow when using them?
No, you know, they've been respectful. There's been very little damage to these charges, no damage. You know, there's been electrical issues, outages and so forth that we've had to call Larry and everything else, but you know, really no issues. But they're relatively new. You know, they're only a few years old, so we'll have to wait and see. And that's why we decided to go with the 5-year warranty with the charge point chargers.
That makes sense. I think just be interesting to see how they get used and the cost for the town, and just keeping an eye on that. I think because the bigger concern I have is that, you know, most of the electric cars are pretty expensive and really not access for the average person unless you want to make that sacrifice. So I just think in a way it's kind of subsidizing their costs for travel. So it's just something that I want to keep an eye on. I'm not saying I disagree with the program. I think the idea of, you know, reducing our usage of, you know, fossil fuels is not a bad thing at all. But I think the state comes up with a lot of these programs and doesn't think through all of the details of what that looks like. And for me, it feels a little bit like a subsidy for people who can afford electric cars. And that's nothing to do with the town, but I think it's just something for us to keep an eye on as they become more popular. So that's all I have. Actually, let me just make sure that's on that topic anyway. Sorry. I got to figure out how to stop this from going into screensaver mode so quickly. Yeah, I'd like to thank you for that, Jim, by the way, for your explanation.
Sure.
As far as Senator Fatman and Representative McKenna, I just, you know, they you know, them bringing in this $300,000 for the town. I know they brought in years past as well for other projects. And I think that, you know, I'm excited about these two projects. I think the Goddard Lodge is such an incredible resource for the town, and seeing that we can get, upgraded restroom facilities is great. I know it's always tough to get exactly what we need, but hopefully we can overcome that. And I'm equally excited about the barn at Waters Farm. From what I understand, that barn I think used to stand on West Millbury Road. I've been in that barn many times, and it's very much like the barn that was at Silvermine Farm when I was a kid growing up working there. And I just have fond memories of these beautiful barns that we have in town. And when I saw the barn coming down, I heard that it was potentially going to Waters Farm. I was pretty excited about that because it was a pretty amazing, beautiful building, and it had a silo, a wooden silo inside, and I just remember that because the barn at Silvermine, it was that part of it was gone. So it was interesting to see how they had fit in, but they were pretty much identical because I think the same person probably built them. So it's pretty exciting to see that get rebuilt. And we've been slowly losing our historic assets over time as they fall into disrepair, and we've lost a lot of barns over the last 10 years or so. So it's good to see another one getting restored back up. So excited about that. The MBR, yeah, it's a little disappointing that the price came in that high. Part of me wonders if we should go back out to bid and why we only got one bid. Because I know we've had this problem with other bids before, and we go back out to bid and we end up getting more bids. So I don't know if that's something to consider.
Yeah, it's a good point. The real challenge is that if we don't go forward this summer, then we're done till next summer.
Yeah.
Because you really need almost 4 weeks of time, and Christmas break is probably not enough time, and so it is something we are debating. The fact is, really, I think one of the major cost drivers on this were the supplies, the costs of material, costs of metal, costs of everything, cost of labor, and so while the estimate was a little below, what came in, I do think the bid is reasonable. I was disappointed that only one company put in a bid, but.
I mean, the price is, to me, it's still far better than the cost of the sewer project. But still, I think it's really just the one bid that concerns me more than anything. So I mean, the price doesn't scare me terribly, but it's, it would have been good to have more bids. So I think, I think that's all I have for today. So thank you, Jim. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Jonathan. Jeff?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will be brief because I think most of the topics have been covered. I just had a couple of questions. The conversation about the charges was I thought was very interesting. How much does it typically cost for somebody to charge their car? Not so much even on an annual basis. Like you go to, you fill up your tank with gas and it's $40.
I've been using a comparison, and it may or may not be accurate, but a gallon of gas is roughly $3 a gallon, let's say. And that, on average, gets a car about 25 miles. If you're to charge at a phase 2 charger, which is about 25 miles an hour in charge, and that costs about $1. So, to fully charge the car, is about, I don't know, $15, give or take. Obviously, with gasoline, it'll be a lot more expensive than that.
Yeah, okay. And so people, I can envision it being used by the school department a lot, just proximity-wise.
Yeah.
What's the mechanism trigger where, you put your car in the morning and somebody else wants to be there, ultimately when we get that volume of cars?
Yeah, right now, I don't know that there's any electric cars driven by teachers. We were able to pinpoint the cars that were registered in the town of Sutton, but that, some of the teachers live in other communities.
Yeah.
And, I've been involved with the schools because I have 2 kids that go there. And I haven't seen any electric cars other than parents dropping off their kids in the morning. So my guess is if anybody owns an electric car, they're 1 or 2, but I don't even think there's that many.
But will there be a notification if, you've been on the charger for X number of hours and
That's something that we need to figure out. And that's why I really want a phase-in period where we can monitor the activity. Because that's one of the considerations. Do we offer free charging for the first 3 hours and then start charging at the 4th hour?
I'm just wondering, like, if you've hooked up your car and I don't know how long it takes, let's say 4 hours, and your 4 hours is up and someone else is waiting to get into that space, is there any kind of notification system that would say, your 4 hours is up, go move your car?
I don't know that there is, unless you've downloaded the ChargePoint app. There may be something that notifies you. But what we can do is create a charge for anybody that keeps their car longer than an X period of time, that all of a sudden they're going to get charged significantly. And that's an incentive for the owner of the car to say, I got to move that car or I'm going to get a big bill.
Cool. Great. The only other comment I had was on, just a question was on the MBR bid. That's sight unseen for them, right? They got a packet of information and...
No. This utility, what is it, utility service company, I think they're partnering with Suez. And Suez is very familiar with this tank. And all of the work that they showed within their bid submission shows MBR tanks in different parts of the country. They do have a regional office, and I think it's in West Bridgewater or someplace in Massachusetts, but they've done MBR tanks across the country. So I know they have the experience. I need more information on.
But it's not going to be a situation where they get here and they look and say, "Oh, I didn't know it was."
No, because they came or was. Did you have? There was. Suez was there. So if they're partnering with Suez was at the site visit. And they did put another $30,000 in the bid for metal, replacement metal. So they did know what they were looking at. They did understand that there was a potential cost liability.
Great. That's it.
All right,
Thanks, Jim.
I'm not really going to repeat or echo any of the comments made by my colleagues, but I do have 2 quick points. One, on the chargers, I'm fully in favor of charging. To Jonathan's point, I see this as a loophole that the more affluent in town could take advantage of on the backs of, us common blue-collar folks that, still drive, automobiles that are gas-powered and not only have to pay the federal gas tax, also has to pay the state sales tax, state gas tax, as well as the additional tax that Charlie Baker slipped through with the TPI or whatever it was called, the Global Warming Initiative that he signed through executive order. So to me, I think it's basic fairness. If I'm going to pay a gas tax to help support the roads, okay, they're electric cars, but they still use the roads. So I think they should not be given compensation by the other taxpayers in town. So I'm fully in favor of paying for it, but ultimately I may be 1 vote out of 5, but we'll see what happens once it's up in operation. As far as the earmarks, this is extraordinary. Not that I want to correct you, but the barn structure that was built is actually a new barn. Because when Waters Farm was looking to raise it last year, they found that the condition of the barn that they tried salvaging had deteriorated to the point when it was basically unsavable. They would have had to remill all of the timber, which would have exceeded the amount of funds they had available. So I believe it was Mike McGovern that came in and helped and worked with Waters Farm and built a new structure. But the purpose of it is not to necessarily be a historical building, like, say, the Darling Barn, but rather it's supposed to be, I think they want to use it more modern for, like, a meeting house. So that way, you can go in and have meetings. Unlike you go to the Darling Bar when there's limited heat, and if you go in there past October, November, I know they did some town thank you lunches, and it got pretty chilly by that point.
Yeah, you got to dress warm.
So I think the new barn is going to be a little more modern, and they'll be able to utilize it year-round, and, it will be an asset.
There's also office space that they're planning on in that new barn, and...
Correct.
Same.
Well, thanks for the correction.
Yep. But you're spot on about the chimney. If you've ever been in the mansion itself, you know that the whole house is actually built around an interconnected network of chimneys. And if you ever have a chance to talk to Joyce Smith, she will definitely pull your ear on the uniqueness of the chimney structure. And if it does get to the point of deterioration, it could be detrimental to the structure as a whole. So it's nice to see that we're finally moving in that direction. And equally exciting is the opportunity to have facilities down there, because I know this board, or maybe the previous board, we talked about renting out the lodge, and obviously we couldn't do that once the portos were removed.
Yep.
So it would be nice to have cleaner facilities that could be updated and I'm sure a little more user-friendly than the portos. Are they going to be left there seasonably? So is it going to be like the portables?
Those are permanent structures that are going to be put in.
Permanent
A
structures.
foundation actually will be dug by the highway department.
Okay.
And then the structure will be transported and dropped on that foundation.
Oh, perfect.
And, you know, obviously there will be a place for the water storage and a place for the septic pump out, so.
And for accessibility, is it going to be dropped in the same point where the portos are?
Fully handicap accessible,
I meant location on site.
location on site.
Yeah, where is the restaurant
Well,
going to be?
the
built?
idea is that it probably be in the facing Goddard Lodge to the far left side. So whatever's there, the pebble access that brings you to the front door would continue to the restroom facilities.
Okay, good, good.
So, yeah, John Kuchar is our ADA coordinator, and he will make sure that they are handicap accessible.
Excellent. Yeah, my concern obviously is if it was going to be built in the parking lot. I know we have limited parking spaces there.
Yeah,
so.
no, it'll be out in the open space well before the fire pit area in front of Goddard Lodge.
Fantastic, fantastic. And the last comment I have is on Juneteenth. Juneteenth obviously is a recognition of when slavery came to an end in the state of Texas. But slavery continued to exist in the country because we have to forget that there were slave states that joined the Union. So slavery actually didn't come to an end in the United States until ratification of the 13th Amendment. But I think it would have been better for Massachusetts to recognize that we were the first state in the country to actually abolish slavery. It was done in a decision by the Superior Court in Worcester. Off the top of my head, it was like the 1790s. So we were actually the first first state in the nation to become a free state. I think it would have been better for Charlie Baker to recognize that point, but if we're going to join the rest of the states, then, you know, it's still a good point and it's a good cause to be involved in, so. Other than that, I don't have any other comments. Great update, thank you, I appreciate that. Before we get into executive session, why don't we go around the board for announcements, roundtable, correspondence, or business topics? Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one thing that actually Jen asked if somebody would read, so I'll do it. Most of us got in the mail the Sutton Open Space Recreation Plan, and you could have linked into that and given your comments then. That part has passed, but there are a couple of open meetings that they're holding, one of which has passed. But tomorrow, on the 16th, anytime between 5:30 and 7:30, there is another meeting to talk about this. And it's at Marion's Camp at 30 Tuttle Road, and we'd encourage everyone to come down if they can.
Thank you, Dave. Wendy?
I have nothing tonight, Mr. Chair.
Jonathan?
I have nothing either.
All set, Mr. Chairman.
All right, I just have two quick ones. One, I'd like to thank the scouts in town. Boy Scouts from Troop, and I hope I get the numbers right, I think it's Troop 181 and 243, along with a contingent of Cub Scouts, joined us down at the Dudley Gendron Post yesterday for celebration of Flag Day. Obviously, our flag was ratified by the Second Continental Congress back in 1777. So, you know, it's a national day of recognition for, you know, the Stars and Stripes, and it was great to see the kids come in and participate. So I'd like to thank all of the parents and the troop leaders that got the contingency down there. Again, there was like 30-something kids, which was fantastic, and I know all the veterans were definitely appreciative. And also Food Pantry, I did not have a chance to speak with Michelle or Diane, but again, we're getting towards the summer months, so if you're going to do some shopping for the Food Pantry, just remember snacks, individual juice boxes like those little Capri Sun pouches, fruit cups, things along those lines, and if possible, remember low or no sugar options. I know Michelle is always appreciative of that. So that is all I have. So next up on the agenda, we are going to be going to executive session. And we are going to be going for reason number 6, to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real estate if the chair declares that an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on negotiating position of the public body. And we are going to adjourn the executive session, but we're not going to re-enter the public component of our meeting.
We're only going to re-enter for the purpose of adjourning the entire meeting.
I knew there was a phrase, I just couldn't remember it off the top of my head. It's been a couple of years since I've been in the seat, what Dave said. So why don't we do a roll call vote to go into executive session?
David Hall, aye.
Wendy Mead, aye.
Jonathan Anderson, aye.
Jeff Bannon, aye.
And Jesse Lemanik, aye. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in.
The recording has stopped.
Thank you, Zoom. So polite.
Jesse?